comparing the novel The Fiery Cross to episode 503, Free Will. If you haven't read the book or watched the episode, be advised, spoilers are coming. Episode 3 covers Part 3, Alarms and Excursions, in our novel. There's really not much difference between our show and our novel in today's episode. The only real difference in this episode is that Fergus ends up delivering Claire's health recommendations as Dr. Rawlings to the printer. Fergus didn't mean for that to be printed. There was writing on the other side that he meant to take to the printer, but apparently the printer thought that the recommendations were either good or would just be a great addition to the newspaper. These get printed, which comes into play in our next episode. So it just sets that up a little bit there. So Jamie, Claire, and the militia from Fraser's Ridge set out to raise up more militia from the nearby settlements. On their way, there's some really great moments. You just see the camaraderie of the people of the ridge around the fire, making jokes. Claire's a little upset that one of them that Jamie does is a little bit at her expense, but Jamie ends up being able to, in Claire's words, "One brief, crude joke and he'd laid public claim to me, removed me from any threat of unwanted advances, and reasserted his position as leader." And Claire says, "Just like a bloody baboon troop." But it's all in good fun. And so you see, the men bonding from the ridge. And since they have to go to war, it's great that they're bonding. So someone breaks into camp in the middle of the night. And it's slightly different in our novel and our show, but basically what happens is Josiah Beardsley shows up, and then his identical twin brother, Keziah, shows up, or Kezi, as he will henceforth be known. And Kezi is deaf, so, there's a bit of confusion at first. Wait, is this the same person? Oh, wait, they're identical twins. Oh, okay. And Kezi can't hear or really speak. So, Joe does all the talking for him, and they kind of have already a deep twin connection. You find out that Joe and Kezi are indentured servants, and they had an indenture term of 30 years, and they're only 14. So it's really sad, and they're starving. Joe also has a T brand for thief on his hand. And I don't think the show makes it so clear, but Joe actually stole the cheese for his brother, who is deaf. You feel so bad for these boys, and you see how sweet Kezi is, because he actually shows up in the camp without any pants on. And what do you find out? Why is he without pants? Because the barn he was sleeping in, the cat had kittens, and they were all sleeping on his pants, and when he was woken by his brother in the night, he didn't want to, leave the kitties uncovered. So you see how sweet Kezi is. Jamie sends Roger and the rest of the militia on to a place called Brownsville to try to raise up more militiamen. And Claire and Jamie go to this weird place called the Beardsleys' residence. And the Beardsleys were the people who had the indenture for Joe and Kezi. So Claire and Jamie arrive at the Beardsleys' place, and, Jamie is trying to see if anyone's home. They're looking around. Jamie, pokes his head in the window, and Jamie pokes his head in the house, and it's basically a hoarder's house, and then someone pops out and kind of jump scares you. Jamie, tries to talk to this woman, and he says, there's these boys, Joe and Kezi, who they say, you own their indenture. I would like to purchase them from you. And she's like, keep them. Go away. Well, I need their papers. They get in the house. There's a stink. A horrible stench coming from the house. You can tell Claire looks sick. And so Jamie, he keeps his Jamie composure. and he's trying to get this woman to find the papers. And, you know, they're looking around, they're seeing, like, there's a lot of goods. Some came from the Native American villages, and clearly there's trading going on, but there's goats that are living in the house. We found out that Kezi was living in the barn. So you do the math. Goats living in the house, Kezi living in the barn. They get to asking her, like, so where's your husband? And she's like, he's dead. But Claire knows from being a doctor that the stench is not just from the goats. There is something else going on. So Claire goes upstairs and she sees what she thinks is the body of Mr. Beardsley dead, and, you know, she goes to look at it and it moves. So Claire's freaked out. She calls Jamie up, and so she asks Mrs. Beardsley, why is he up here? You said he was dead. What is going on? And, you know, Mrs. Beardsley says, oh, he had an apoplexy, which is the old-fashioned word for stroke, and that she couldn't move him, which you're like, I don't know. And then Claire, being a doctor, is trying to, like, help the guy, even though he is very, very close to death. And she sees that Mrs. Beardsley has tortured him. So Claire tries to tend this guy's wounds. She doesn't know if he's gonna make it. And then Mrs. Beardsley comes and tries to strangle him, with Claire and Jamie right there. And of course they stop her. So our main difference of this whole Beardsley encounter, I'll just call it, in our novel versus our show is, in our show, they had this happen all at once. Mrs. Beardsley tries to kill her husband, and then in the moment of, you know, Jamie trying to pull her off of him, her water breaks. What? She was pregnant? Yep, she was pregnant. So, yeah, Mrs. Beardsley has a baby right then and there. And you also see that the baby is actually half black. And so it's very clear that it's not Mr. Beardsley's child. And in our show, we even have Mrs. Beardsley laughing like, look, it's not your child. In our show, Claire and Jamie spend the night there, and Mrs. Beardsley steals away, and she leaves the baby along with Joe and Kezi's indenture papers. In our book, Claire and Jamie actually are taking Mrs. Beardsley along with them. It's either the next day or the day after, and Mrs. Beardsley steals away in the night. They didn't even know she was pregnant yet at this point, and she leaves her baby out there in the snow. In our show, there's no snow. It may be late fall or something, but in our novel, it's clearly there's snow, and Mrs. Beardsley leaves her baby in the snow. Our episode ends with Jamie and Mr. Beardsley, who can't really speak, but Jamie tells him to do 1 blink for yes, 2 blinks for no. And basically, you know, he's so far gone with his stroke, and his leg is gonna need cut off because it's gangrene. Jamie turns into a priest a bit, and he puts the cross up on the wall, and he crosses himself, and he puts this guy out of his misery for mercy's sake. You see Jamie afterwards talking to Claire like, man, my own dad had a stroke. Was he just laying there, you know, for months, unable to move or whatever? And Claire's like, no, your sister loved you. She would have told you the truth. And I don't think your dad suffered. So you see them agreeing that Jamie, if he has a stroke, he doesn't want to suffer for a long time after it. So Jamie wants what he feels like is the same mercy that he just gave to this Mr. Beardsley. I really like this episode. Always a very creepy encounter at the Beardsleys' place, but I felt like the show did it really well. It was very similar book versus show, and I especially like the men from the militia bonding. I thought that was really great. Thank you so much for watching the Outlandish comparison. Please subscribe, turn on the notifications, and I'll see you real soon.
Mountains of rain and sun.